Hi. Hi everyone, welcome to the tutorial 4 of CS374 class. In this tutorial, we'll be covering React. What is React? React is the most popular JavaScript framework that is maintained by Facebook, and it is used for building interactive UI. So why is React so popular? One of the biggest reasons is that it can be used to build a single page app, SPA, which means that when there is an event to the website, only the minimal unit of the UI is rendered. For example, when the user clicks onto the like button, only the like button will be re-rendered instead of the whole page. Similarly, when other users click onto their friends' stories, only the story tab will be re-rendered. And as a result, SPA offers a better speed to the users. And the reason why SPA can be easily implemented in React is that React is component-based. And thus, to effectively use React, understanding and thinking in a component-based way is important. And let's take a look at the Facebook as an example to understand what component-based means. Although we see the website as a single page, it is actually divided into different components, such as header, sidebar, and newsfeed, and stories. And these are the components of the website. And this is our goal of today's tutorial. We'll be building a simple newsfeed application that consists of 4 components: input box, newsfeed, postbox, and like button. And before we jump into the implementation, there are 2 important concepts of React. And first one is state. State is the values that are private and controlled by the component. And by overriding them, we can re-render the page. Examples of state will be username and count of likes. So these are the states that are controlled by the components. And the second concept is props. And props simply stands for properties. And we can pass on values from one component to another, for example, states. And these values are received as props. Props are, they can only be passed in a unidirectional way from parent to a child component. And the values are read-only, so if you need to make modifications, you will need to declare another variable. And prerequisite to this tutorial is the basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you don't have a basic knowledge of these 3 concepts, it will be quite hard to follow the tutorial. So make sure that you go over tutorial 1 and 2 before this tutorial. And you have to install Node version 8 higher than 8.0 and npm version higher than 5.6. Now, if your Node and npm is ready, please go to this link and see how you can create a new React app. And as it says here, if you're learning React, use create React app. So my recommendation is also starting from using create React app. This is the comment that is offered by Facebook. It just sets everything to starting a new React app from the beginning. So just if you're using Windows, open your command prompt. If you're using Mac, open terminal, and depending on your OS, open a appropriate app and copy what's there. So I'm going to name it as a simple news feed. And this is going to take a while and might show a lot of errors, but you don't have to worry. You just have to have patience. So you don't have to worry about all these errors. Okay, so it's done. If you want to run your first React app, you just simply have to press an npm start. No, you first have to go to the simple newsfeed folder. Then you have to press an npm start. Then you will see the first React app. Let's stop the app for now. In Mac, you have to press Control-C and open the simple newsfeed folder with your favorite IDE. I'm going to use Visual Studio. So you will see a bunch of new codes that you didn't write, but Create React App did for you. And the main code you have to see is app.js. As you see on your React app, it says added source/app.js and save to reload. All you have to do is erase this part, and let's see if anything changes by saving it. Saving the hello world. You have to start the app again. Then, yeah, there you go. Then we see hello world in your React app. So this is how we are going to implement using React. This tutorial will be in this order. We'll first implement input box. Then we're going to implement a post box. Then we're going to implement a like button inside the post box. And then we'll implement post box, multiple post boxes into the newsfeed. If anyone is confused what I'm talking about our goal of today's tutorial. So I'm going to implement input box first, then post box, then a like button. Then I'm going to extend the post boxes. I'm going to implement newsfeed so that they can display multiple post boxes. And before we jump into actual implementations, there's another concept that is important in React. Not necessarily a concept. There's two ways of defining components. One is class-based, one is functional-based. I'll just go through the implementations, for now, just be aware that there's two different ways of defining a component, but basically they do the same thing. It depends on when you use it. The length of the code can be different, but basically they do the same thing. Because class-based components is easier to explain how states and props are used. I'm initially going to use define app as a class-based component. Then later on in this tutorial, I will try to explain how to convert class-based component into a function-based component and what's the difference. This is how you define a class-based component. You have to write class, then the class name, then extends React component. Then you have to add extra things. For now, you just have to follow what I'm writing. Whereas for function components, you just have to return. You have to add a function render. Then inside render, you have to write return. What you want to return, the element that you want to return. Let's see if it runs fine. So it runs without error. Now I'm going to initialize the components. So I'm going to create a folder named components. Then in this components folder, I'm going to create 4 folders. First one is input box, postbox, like button, and newsfeed. And inside of each folder, I'm going to create a file named index.jsx, and I'm going to leave it empty for now. And note that JSX, the extension, stands for JavaScript React file. And for like button, I'm also creating an index.jsx, and I'll do the same for the rest of the folders. Okay. So the first to-do item is implementing input box. So implementing component-based class-based component, I first have to import React from React. Then I have to define the class. It's more like a convention that you have the class name or function name aligned with the folder or the file name. So I'm naming it as an input box class. Then I'm extending using the React component. Then I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the app.js. Then I'm going to render, then return. I'm an input box. Let's see if this works out well. For each component, you have to export which component will be exported by default when you import the component from another component. So after you write export default input box, you have to go back to app.js, Then import input box from a component slash input box. Then all you have to do is add input box components in the render. Let's see. Now we have hi, I'm an input box. An input box. Okay. So let's go back to the slides and see what we want to do. So we want to have username and post and a submit button. So I'm going to have a paragraph P. I'm not using div because P gives margin, whereas div doesn't. I just hope that it's more prettier. And so I'm going to add an input element. Then for post, I'm going to have a text area. It's just similar to input. Then I'm going to add a submit button. Okay. Then let's see how it looks like. Okay. Now it looks like this, and to just make it more prettier, I will add some of the CSS. And I'm going to add an index.css in input box folder. And this is why I divided components in different folders so that I can better manage the styling of each component. And note that all the elements are centered aligned, although you didn't do it. It's because in the original app.css file, we have the text align center. So this is making this div to align all its elements to be centered. But I'm going to erase rest of the styling, which will have no effect. Then now I'm going to add styling to index.css and to automatically see if everything's going okay. I'm going to add index.css to the input box index.jsx file. Now if I apply any CSS, it will be applied to the web page. Where should we start from? So I'm going to add a input box container. Then I'm going to have a name this ID as an input box so that I can make this area bigger. I will go to the index CSS for input box container. I will give a margin 10px to the top and bottom, but give auto margin to the sides. Then I will restrict the width to be 400px. And for input box, I'm going to align the text to be on the left. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, looks like this. Then to make it more look like this, I'll just add input and text area. I'll give them a width of 100%. Now it looks like this. Okay. Yeah, so it's almost done. But to add newsfeed, we'll need to get inputs. Because we didn't do any JavaScript here, we are not going to be able to fetch any of the data. So first thing I will do is I'll add the ID to the input as well as to the post. We have IDs ready. We will need to handle the submit button. In React, they have a on-click attribute, which if you put in a function, this function will automatically be called when you click on some element. Not necessarily only for a button, but you could also use onClick for div or p or other types of element. Before we write something, we will have to define a function. I'll call it onClick function. No, on submit. Sorry. In class-based component, if you're defining a function within the class-based component, you don't need this function. If you write function, it'll show a error. So this is how you define a function within the component-based class-based component. Then what I want to do here is I want to first fetch the username and post. So I'll use JavaScript to fetch the username. Post. Okay. Then I want to see if I can fetch both the post and username correctly. So this is a very important part. Oh, never mind. Yeah, let's make sure that you call this function in this format with this and without the brackets. Then let's see by clicking submit button whether the user and post is logged on the console, printed on the console. Username. This is a sample post. Oh. So I have to fetch the value of the input and value of the text area. So I'll do it again. Username 123. This is a sample. Okay. Now you see that it's well fetched. So now what we want to do is we want to send it back to the app, which is the parent component, so that from this app they can pass values back to the newsfeed and Postbox to add new posts. So in the app component, I'm going to add a function here as well and name it on post submit. Then I'm going to have two arguments named username and post. And let's see if we can get it correctly. So example of passing props to the input box component. So in the app, we are passing onPost submit function as a prop to the input box. So you open the input box component, then you can receive props using in this manner. On post submit. So in this format, you will save on post submit it will save whatever the variable name here is found on the props. So in this example, this on post submit variable will have the function that is found on the on post submit function in the this.props. And because we are using this in a custom function that we created in the class-based component, we'll have to do a unique convention of React, which is binding this to be usable in this function. So if you have experience of different programming language, this might be familiar. But if you are not, you don't have to worry. You just have to follow in this manner whenever you use this in a custom function. So you just have to remember that. Now I'm going to simply call this onPost submit, then pass on username and post. So I'm making this not work now from now on. So in my logic, if I click submit button here now, I should be seeing username and post on the console. See, now you see that this is printed in the line of app.js line 13, which is here. Okay. Now I think our to-do list one is almost done. So let's move on to the second to-do item. So we are going to initialize Postbox. So again, import React from React, then class Postbox extends React.components. For now, I don't think we need constructor. We'll just write render return this is a post box, and don't forget to export so that we can use it from other components. And then don't forget to import. Right, now you see the post box here. So let's make a post box that looks similar, something similar like this. So I'm going to have div. Since this is going to be a multi-line, I'll use the bracket. Div, I'm going to have a post number placeholder, and I also need a username placeholder. Let's just use P. And I also need a post placeholder. And I'm going to need a button placeholder as well. Okay. Before we apply the styling, let's just see if we can have the props passed down from the app fine. And we'll be using state for that. Defining the state can be done in this way. We'll have username as a empty string and post as an empty string as well. And to update the state, this is how you can update the state. This set state, and you have to name the previous state as a variable. It doesn't necessarily have to be prep state. You can use any name, but I prefer to use prep state. Then you just have to redefine, you just have to override the previous state. So I'm overriding username as a username and post as post. Let's see. And because we're using this in a custom function, I think we'll be having an error if we don't bind this onPostSubmit function. But let's just see if it really causes an error. Okay, see, this causes an error because set states, we are reading a property set state of undefined, and it means that this is undefined in the onPostSubmit function. So all we have to do is bind this to the onPostSubmit function. So now we're not seeing any error. We're seeing everything fine in the console. And a very useful tip is that you install the React plugin on Google Chrome, then you can see the components and the state. So now you can see that state of the app is like this. So the post is 1 to 3, username is 1 to 3, and we are going to use this value and pass this as a props to the post box and display in the username and post placeholders. Now let's do that. So username is going to be this state dot username post this state dot post. Although you can write in this manner, this is not a good convention. I would rather do it as in this way. So this way of defining variable is pretty similar to how we defined onPostSubmit function in the input box component. So this is a very useful convention that you might want to remember. So instead of this state.username, I'm just going to use username. Then for the post, I'm just going to replace it as post. Now we go back to Postbox. Then we can fetch the props again. Username and what is it? Post. This dot props. Okay. Then we click Postbox. We see that we see two properties. Post is 1 to 3 2, username is 1 to 3. We can use this and replace it here. In React, the way to use variable is using the curly bracket. So you just have to write username with the curly bracket and post in curly bracket. Let's see. Username 1 to 3. This is a simple. Okay, so it's working. Now I want to apply some styling. So similarly, I want to add container here, but because I'm going to have multiple post boxes, I'm going to use classes instead of ID. So I'm just going to name it post container. Then within the div inside post container, I'm going to name the class post. Then the CSS, I'm going to add styling for both post and post container. To align it with the input box, I'm going to make width as 400 pixels, but you may use different pixel. And I'm going to give margin auto to make it aligned centered. And I'm going to give a border so that you don't see it here. So it actually has a not pretty, but some kind of boundary. So I'm just going to have one px solid black. Let's see. So it's, why is it not there? Okay. So it's important to not forgetting to import things. Okay. So I have something like this. Then I want to align it left. So it looks like this. Okay. So we have 1 and 2 almost done. Now we will move on to like button. Like button is just there for there, but it's not functional. Instead of just having button like, we are going to replace it as a like button as a component, and I'm going to import it from like. Okay. So I'm going to import React from React again and define like button class. Same here. For now, I don't think I need constructor because I'm not going to need any state here yet. So I'm just going to have render return button like. I forgot to export. So now I have the same visualization, but note that this like button is actually a component, not unlike like previously. So what I wanted to do here, I just wanted to have help people to have a better understanding of how state and function can work more interactively. So now I'm going to add some states of counting the number of likes. So I'll have to add constructor with props because for now I'm not going to have any like props passed from Postbox. You don't have to write this, but I'm just going to write it anyways. And I'm going to add a state and have count 0. And okay. And what I want to do is whenever you click on the like button, I want to update count so that I can show the users how many counts they have clicked. Update count, note that I'm not writing function because it's a custom function that we're defining in the class component. I'm going to set state and do prep state. Let's see how I did it here. Okay, so I just copied how I did set state from app.js. So I'm just doing the same thing. Count prep state dot count plus 1. So this is what I want to do. Okay. Now let's see. Make sure that you don't add the brackets in this kind of on-click function, because they will be called infinitely. Now I'll try to click on like button. Did a dumb mistake. I didn't bind the update count again. So if you see the state, we can see that the count is increasing. So what we can do here is you can define count using this format again, and we can be more interactive with the text. So what I want to do is when the count is 0, I want to just show like, so that people want to press like. But when it's over, when it's not 0, it should be over 0, then I'm going to return like count times. So this is a just if else one line if else one line if else statement that many people use, many programmers use for JavaScript and as well as React. So this is a useful statement that you might want to know for your future implementations. So let's see how it's done. So I will click like button. So it's like 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, and so on. Okay, so we're almost done with 1, 2, and 3 to-do lists. So I'm going to implement newsfeed now. Newsfeed, again, import React, from React, then class newsfeed extends React component, render, return newsfeed, and don't forget to export. I hope now you're a bit familiar to how to create a new class-based component. For now, let's just delete and just comment the postbox, then replace it with a newsfeed. So for thanks to the Visual Studio, they automatically found where the newsfeed component is and they imported it. But you will have to import it if you're using different IDE or using Visual Studio in different setting. I'm just going to delete postbox line because I'm going to call all the postboxes in newsfeed, and I'm also going to delete this import line. Okay, so let's see. Now I only have newsfeed. So how is the usernames and posts are going to be passed on to newsfeed? I'm going to make username and post as an array, instead of a single string, so that I can hold multiple values of usernames and posts. And on post submit, I'm going to also keep the usernames and posts in an array format. And this React way of doing it is using ... convention, perhaps states usernames, and add the username on the end. Posts. So what does ... in JavaScript means is that they copy the existing array. So in this line, we are defining usernames as the previous usernames and the username. It's just if you think of Python, we are just appending username to the existing usernames array. So this is what they do. And now, instead of username and posts, I'm calling usernames and posts from this state, and I'm just going to pass it on to newsfeed. Okay. Now I will move on to newsfeed. Let's see. Let's see. Const usernames posts. Now, initially, the app has no empty list of posts and usernames. But when we submit something, we see that it's appended. When we do it again, we see now we see that the new values are added at the end of each array. And this is what this set state does. To see if the props are well passed on to newsfeed, I'm opening props of newsfeed, and it looks the same. So here, let's try to print out multiple post boxes like this. How should we do it? So the easiest way, most common way of displaying multiple displaying components in a loop is using map function. So what I would do is use map function. Map function, then have the value in IDX. For now, just copy what I'm doing. I'll explain after I write it down because it's super hard to explain at the same time. Okay. So what map function does, it's a JavaScript function. It iterates the array from the beginning to the end. And in this file and IDX, they will have each value in order. And this is just going to be the index of each value. So I'm passing on each username and each post to the post. So each values in the usernames and posts array will be rendered as a post component. And now I have to modify Postbox components so that they can manipulate this username postbox post props. But from the previous implementation, I have already done that. So let's see how it works. Okay, so I didn't import post on newsfeed. Wait, this is not post, this is postbox. So username 123, post is this is a sample post. Now it's very similar to what to our goal. This is sample post 2. Now we see it here, and like button also works independently. Last thing we want to do is we want to send index to the postbox, and index is here. I just want to add 1 so that it can start from 1 instead of 0. And I'm going to fetch index variable in postbox as well, and I'm going to add it into the placeholder. Let's see. Username 123. This is a sample post. Okay. It looks very similar. Before we end the session, I'll just introduce how to transform the class-based component into function-based component. The latest version of React allows you to transform any of the class-based component into a function-based component and vice versa. I'll use input box JSX as an example. I'll just copy it on the top and comment them out. So the first thing you have to do is remove the class and write it as a function, and a function with props. And you don't need constructors in function. Unlike class-based component, when you're defining a function inside the function component, you have to have function. And because we're not a class-based component anymore, we are going to use props instead of this props. And rest of them are the same, except that we also don't use render. We just directly return after the function. So this is why it's functional component. You just have a single return value at the end. And functional component is it's usually much shorter. Okay. So if you have a function that use this, you also have to remove this. In functional component, there's no use of this, unlike class-based component. So basically, functional components are usually shorter than class-based components. So I prefer to use functional components. But when you have states, it's often easier to implement using class-based components. But to learn more about how to use functional components to have states, please refer to the React main website. This is all I have prepared for today's tutorial. Hope you have enjoyed the tutorial and had some experience to get familiar with React. If you have any questions, I'm holding a Q&A session soon, so meet you there in Q&A session. Thank you.